93 new COVID-19 cases in Singapore, and employers are reminded to schedule migrant workers for bi-weekly testing.
Staycations are the new way to vacation, and Singaporeans are all for giving local businesses a boost.
It's official. US Democrats nominate Joe Biden to take on Donald Trump in the upcoming presidential election.
Good evening, it's midweek Wednesday. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman.
And I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
An update on Singapore's COVID-19 situation. 93 new cases were confirmed today, taking our total to just over 56,000. Today's count includes 2 community cases, both work pass holders.
There were also 6 imported cases, with work permit holders currently under quarantine forming the majority of today's overall infections. The Health Ministry will share more details tonight.
All dormitories have been declared cleared of COVID-19, including the standalone blocks in purpose-built dormitories that served as isolation or quarantine facilities. Around 333,000 workers, or 86%, in the construction, marine and process sectors have been allowed to resume work.
These workers have been given the Green Access Code that clears them for work, and the Manpower Ministry expects 20,000 more residents from recently cleared dorms to have the same code soon after their dormitories have completed the necessary preparations.
Meanwhile, about 100 migrant workers residing in dormitories previously cleared of the virus have tested positive for COVID-19. The cases emerged during routine testing of these workers, which are conducted every 2 weeks. 7,000 workers are now under quarantine as a result of the new cases.
Dr. Liang Honan joins us to give more insight into this. Now, he's an infectious diseases specialist at the Rophi Clinic at Mount Elizabeth Novena. So, Dr. Leong, what are the possible sources where these 100 workers thereabouts could have gotten infected, given that they can't leave their dormitory premises, and for some, they're only allowed to go to their work sites?
I think that's a very good question. If you think about the testing with the swab test into the nose, our overall sensitivity is about 93 to 94%. So that means for 100 people who has the disease, you screen all of them, there's about 6 to 7 of them which you miss out. So these are what we call false negatives. They have the disease, but they're labeled as negative because the test is never 100% foolproof. And this is in the best of hands at the National Centre of Infectious Diseases in Singapore. They do the most tests. They are most accustomed to this form of testing. Now, if you look back then into the dormitory, could there actually be cases that were missed? Should there actually be repeat cases? But if you think about it, if I need to do repeat testings, then the ability to clear the foreign worker load is just too long and too much. So what they've gone on next to actually go symptoms. If you have symptoms, then you go for testing. But again, we realize this virus is very sneaky. You can have asymptomatic shedders. So I suspect the case came about because it was asymptomatic and the person had a false negative on testing, which means 1 or 2 of the workers were within the group and they mingled around with no symptoms and started spreading the disease over and over and over.
What should the general population pay attention to then in terms of transmission, since we enjoy more freedom of movement now, and perhaps complacency comes into play as well with our low community case numbers?
Certainly, I do see it in the public now. Everyone's going out to enjoy themselves. We have been free. No, Singapore, you are not free at this point in time. Rather, we are still under the threat of COVID-19. They can come in through the foreign workers. We still have cases of them there. It can come in from the community, low numbers, but there probably be 1 or 2 stragglers around, and even imports, people coming into Singapore. Now, what do? I would, number 1, maintain the Trace Together app, maintain the safe entry apps, which we do when we enter a place. I would, in addition, wear the mask. The mask serves 2 purposes. Number 1, if I'm sick, I prevent transmission very well. And number 2, if someone sick comes to me, I would actually minimize the risk of getting sick. Number 4, very importantly, maintain social distancing. When we do social distancing, we do it well. But when the mask wearing became less regular, they had cases coming up again. So one thing, Singapore will always be under the threat of COVID-19, not because of our own doing, but because the whole world has not been rid of COVID-19. Until COVID-19 goes away or goes kaput, then can we truly relax and walk without masks. So Singaporeans, you've done a fabulous job to date. I'm extremely proud of you. We are going to go in for the long run. This is a marathon until the whole world is lifted off the shadows of COVID-19.
Right. Well, back to the foreign workers, Dr. Leong. It was reported just a while ago that all dormitories have been cleared of COVID-19, including the standalone blocks in purpose-built dormitories that served as quarantine facilities. But just yesterday, the Manpower Ministry said that there are still 118,000 foreign workers who have yet to be scheduled for rostered routine testing. So I guess, with all the dorms cleared, including the quarantine facilities, these workers, they will be cleared to go back to work in the future. But when it comes to the rostered routine testing, what do you make of the process? Do you think it's too cumbersome and inconvenient for employers to sustain?
I think it's very challenging. Indeed, many employers have come to me and say, I need to do tests every 2 weeks. The cost to my laborers, the cost to my staff, my company, I am going to go into financial breakdown. I think we have to relook at the way we work, so in such a way that we can carry on with our work, do it safely in COVID-19, and yet get regular testing. So some of the things which you can do is this. We can learn from the Chinese. What the Chinese have done when they did a few million swabs over a week was that they did group testing. So they put about 5 individual samples all into one PCR testing. This in turn would reduce down the cost. In other words, you actually divide it down by 5. That makes perfect sense. So group testing, should anyone be positive in a group, then you actually tease them out. But in the case of the foreign workers, I think we can take it one level higher. I think the foreign workers ideally should work as a team. Among the males in Singapore, it's very much like working in a platoon in national service in the army. All work together, all stay together, all share the bunk beds in the barracks together at the same time. So when they work together, they go to the same place together, they work at a site together, and then when return, they come back all at the same time. So it becomes isolated units in terms of work. Now, and when we do testing, there could be 12 of them in this unit. And what you do is you do 12 swabs, but put them all into one test. With this, if any one of them were to turn out positive, the test would turn out positive. And that's what you would do, because you would put on stay-home notice and quarantine the rest that are inside the same group, or what we call the platoon group. Now, given this scenario, then, you can tease out who has infection and who doesn't have infection. It serves a few purposes. Number one, reorganizes the way we work. We work by team so that one team individual doesn't cross to another team. Number two, we actually save on cost because you're going to group testing. And number three, once you identify one person as infected, the whole platoon or the whole team is contaminated, it makes perfect sense to stop their work at that point in time. Only by using clever methods or perhaps other variations of it can we try to have some normality of life, some normal business work, and perhaps lesser cost for the companies and better economy for Singapore.
Right. Well, Dr. Leong, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. That was Dr. Liang Honan, infectious diseases specialist from the Rophi Clinic.
Also in the local headlines, the People's Action Party today announced that it has reappointed Dr. Janil Puthucheary as Party Whip and Ms. Sim Ann as Deputy Party Whip. Dr. Janil has served as Party Whip since June 6 last year, having taken over the role from Trade and Industry Minister Chan Chun Sing. The role of a Party Whip is to ensure good communication in the party ranks, contribute to the smooth running of its parliamentary machinery and serve as disciplinarian.
Separately, the government parliamentary committees have also been formed. Almost all 12 committees have new chairmen with the exception of 3, Defence and Foreign Affairs, Finance and Trade and Industry, as well as Social and Family Development.
In other news, a recent workplace resilience survey found that those working from home can be more stressful than those working on the front lines of the Covid-19 pandemic. Conducted by the National University of Singapore Health System Mind Science Centre, the survey found that 61% of those working from home reported feeling stressed compared with 53% of frontliners. And women are more likely to report being stressed at work and at home compared to men. A separate survey on mental health resilience that was done concurrently by the centre found that younger people are more likely to report feeling anxious and to be less mentally resilient than those who are older. Now, we'll have more on this topic on tomorrow's show, so do stay tuned.
Meanwhile, 2 Singaporean men have been jailed for arranging a marriage of convenience between another Singaporean man and a Chinese woman. Chu Yong-sheng and Yap Jin-lian were sentenced to 32 weeks jail. Chu will be jailed for an additional 12 weeks for hurting police officers in a dispute unrelated to the sham marriage. Chu and Yap will also be fined $3,000 and $2,000 respectively.
The Singapore Cocktail Bar Association, a non-profit group formed to help bars hit by the Covid-19 pandemic, has raised $120,000, which will go to help 240 affected bar staff. Eligible employees whose monthly pay is $3,400 or less can each receive up to $500. The association said $60,000 were raised from corporate sponsors, with the remaining amount matched by the Singapore Business Federation Foundation via its $2 million Compassion Fund.
Now, of course, it's not just Singapore's nightlife that's suffering right now. For our tourism sector, the fallout from COVID-19 has been severe and a full recovery is not expected anytime soon.
Multimedia journalist Chow Suen takes a look at how Singapore's tourist hotspots are coping without tourists.
Lying by the pool, sipping a drink at noon, it really feels like I'm on vacation in Bali or Phuket. All without getting on a plane. I mean, not like we can do that now with the pandemic in our midst. For now, especially here at Sentosa, it looks like the staycation is the new vacation.
And that is what hundreds of local businesses are counting on. Singaporeans going on a Singapore-holiday.
This crisis has been devastating to the hospitality industry. And obviously, Far East Hospitality being one of the larger players in Singapore, we have not been spared.
The Barracks Hotel in Sentosa has 40 rooms, but only 60% of these rooms are available for booking at this time, given safe distancing measures.
At this stage, no one is particularly concerned about making profits at this point in time. I think if we can have enough business to ensure that we are paying salaries, that would be, I think, the objective of this year.
And here at Bounce Trampoline Park, we can see the first signs of the tourism industry bouncing back, even as international visitors continue to stay away.
I mean, we love our local crowd, and a lot of our regulars have came back to support us. We are operating, so we are making some money, right? But there are other elements, historical data like a year ago versus July a year ago. We're making less than half of what we used to make.
Across the industry, one measure that has helped keep businesses open and preserve jobs has been the Jobs Support Scheme.
JSS has been superb. I've not had to lay anybody off. I've kept all my workers. It kept them paid, especially in this stage when we don't know when we would be allowed to, increase our capacity, or for that matter, whether social group sizes are going to grow bigger.
This job support scheme, it doesn't just look after the short term, but it's taken into account that this crisis is going to be with us for a while. So it's going to be until March of 2021, which is really welcome news, instead of living month to month in the hope that there'll be some support from the government.
There is more help on its way. The tourism industry stands to benefit as Singaporeans will be given $320 million in tourism credits to spend domestically.
We're now joined by Dr. Kevin Cheong, Chairman of the Association of Singapore Attractions, to discuss this further. Doctor, let's get right into it. How much of a respite would the extension of the GSS scheme be for the attractions sector?
Well, I think it has helped us a lot, the 75% right up to this month. And moving forward, as most tourist attractions or visitor attractions go on to receive 50% right up to March next year, it definitely helps us to weather the storm and iron out a lot of our anxieties.
Well, more broadly speaking, more help will also be extended to help the domestic tourism sector through the disbursement of the $320 million tourism credits. Do you think, though, that this will incentivize Singaporeans to rediscover Singapore in line with the new Singapore Tourism Board campaign?
Well, I beg to differ about rediscovering Singapore. I believe Singaporeans need to discover Singapore. Many of our Singaporean friends do know, say for example, Chatuchak better than even Ang Mo Kio or Chinatown, right? So let's step out and I think this definitely will incentivize Singaporeans to step out and feel the neighborhoods, feel the places which they have not actually been to at all.
Right. I suppose you're in talks with some of these firms and companies in the attraction sector. If you could share with us, a preview of what to expect, what Singaporeans can expect in terms of the deals being offered.
Well, it's not just about deals. I think it's about value packages and curating experiences for the family. I mean, we're all faced with this ceiling of number of people per group and capacity limits. I think what we're trying to do is to come up with very interesting, novel programs for the family of 4 or 5 people. Some of them could be back of house tours. Some of them is really to do things together as a family. I think that's where our focus should be and will be going towards.
Right. Well, Kevin, the attractions and tourism sectors are not expected to recover quickly, but are there bright spots looking forward?
Well, I think for starters, have been reminded about the importance of the resident market, about locals, and knowing what they want and what we want. And I think that becomes the base market that we must always be focusing on. Bright spots, I think a lot of attractions who are outdoor, who have wide open spaces, that's something which has been very good. And I think a lot of Singaporeans are also looking at family packages, going out as a family. It could be 2-tier family, 3-tier families, but that becomes interesting for all of us.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for setting aside time to speak with us. A pleasure to speak with you. And we were speaking to the chairman of the Association of Singapore Attractions, Dr. Kevin Cheong.
Good evening, I'm Dylan Ang, and here are the top global headlines. South Korea today reported its highest daily rise in coronavirus cases since early March. Today's 297 new infections came as an outbreak in Seoul appeared to intensify and marked the 6th straight day of triple-digit increases. In a major step to resolving the scandal surrounding 1MDB, Goldman Sachs Group and Malaysia have signed an agreement to finalize the bank's $3.9 billion settlement. The deal, announced in July, called for Goldman to pay $2.5 billion, while guaranteeing the return of $1.4 billion of 1MDB assets seized by authorities around the world. This in exchange for Malaysia dropping charges against the bank. China and the US will each allow air carriers to double current flights to 8 per week between the world's 2 largest economies. This will see carriers like United Airlines and Delta Airlines go from twice weekly to 4 times weekly. The US Transportation Department said it still hopes that China will agree to restore full US flight rights under their bilateral aviation agreement. Hong Kong was hit by its strongest typhoon this year, cancelling morning trading in the city's stock market. A number 9 storm signal was issued by Hong Kong's observatory this morning, the second highest on the scale, but has since been downgraded to number 3 as of noon today. Meanwhile, authorities in China's Guangdong province said the typhoon made landfall in Zhuhai City. And lastly, US Democrats have formally nominated Joe Biden as the Democratic presidential nominee, With the theme Leadership Matters, the Democratic National Convention aimed to make the case that Mr. Biden would represent a return to normalcy for the country by repairing a pandemic-stricken America and end the chaos of President Donald Trump. And those are the headlines around the world. It's back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks so much, Dylan. Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Koe. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.